Hey everyone, I'm Jackie from Adam Hart Cross Stitch, and this is the 5th and final episode of my Learn to Cross Stitch video series. In this series, I am walking you through all of the basics when it comes to cross stitch so that you can complete a project all on your own. If you want to download the same pattern I've been working on here, you can go to my website where I have a completely free pattern download and links to all of the supplies I've used throughout the series. In the previous video, we finished stitching our little happy heart here, so now it is time to take it from this to this so that it's ready to be hung and displayed. Now, I have to admit, I am kind of boring when it comes to finishing my cross stitch projects. I've been asked over and over again, what do you do with your cross stitch projects when they're finished? And my answer is always the same. I'm like, duh, I hang it up. Or I gift it to someone else to be hung up. But there are definitely more creative options out there. Some really popular ones are making things like pin cushions, bookmarks, even pillows. Just keep in mind, cross stitch is kind of one of the more delicate types of needlework, so you'll just want to be careful with however you are finishing your cross stitch projects. There's already so many great tutorials out there for tons of different ways to finish your projects. So if you're not into the idea of just hanging it up on the wall, definitely take to the internet and do some research. There's so many cool options out there. But for this video, I wanted to focus on what I think is one of the more common and easier ways to finish a project, which is a hoop finish. Now, you can finish your project in the same hoop that you use to stitch it in. That is what I did for this one right here. I also really like these little plastic hoops that kind of look like they're wood for finishing. Now, I don't like to stitch in these, but I will buy these in like variety packs. They'll come in a bunch of different shapes and sizes, and then I just have a bunch of them on hand to choose from anytime I'm ready to finish a project. If you go online, you can also find like tons of different hoops specifically for finishing, some really beautiful wood ones as well. So there's a lot of options. So hoop finish is the name of the game, but first we need to prep. Do you remember back in one of the earlier episodes when I said you should be washing your hands before picking up your project to work on it? Before you start stitching, a really good habit to get in is washing your hands before you pick up your project to start working on it. Did you do it? Well, if you did, congratulations. You are a better stitcher than I am. Chances are though, with or without religiously washing your hands before working on your project each and every time, you may have noticed some dirt or grime starting to build up. Now, this little heart that we worked on is a fairly small project, so chances are it probably doesn't look all that bad, but especially with larger projects or ones that you keep in a hoop for a really long time, you can expect some dirt and grime to build up. So what can you do about it? Well, for me, I love to wash my projects once I'm finished. Now, washing your projects at the end is a completely optional step, and there are some major caveats to it. The most important being your fabric and floss. Now, in this project, I'm just using a white piece of Aida cloth, and I'm using DMC embroidery floss. So DMC specifically is a color fast brand of floss, meaning these colors should not run when you wash them. So for me, if I'm using fabric and floss that claims to be color fast, 9 out of 10 times, I'm going to opt to just wash my project at the end. Now, for some people, even if they're using DMC floss or a different brand of color fast embroidery floss, they may still worry, especially with some of those like really deep colors like a red or an orange, that it's going to run. So it is really a personal preference whether or not you wash, and could also just depend on the overall state of your project when you get to the end of it. Just remember, if your fabric or your floss is hand dyed or over dyed, do not wash. There is a very high chance that the colors would run and could totally ruin your project. But since I've decided that I do want to wash my project, let's go ahead and remove it from the hoop. This part is nice and straightforward. I'm just going to unscrew this little guy at the top here, pop the top off, remove the back. Now, you'll notice right away the hoop has left creases in the fabric. Don't worry, this is totally normal. Now, if your project is really creased up like this one is and you're not going to wash it, you can still safely iron it to remove any of the hoop or crease marks. You just want to be sure not to use any steam and to iron it from the back side, but we're going to cover all of that in the next step. The first thing I want to do though is get this into some soapy water. I like to keep this nice and simple, just starting with some warm water and a drop of dish soap. I just use whichever dish soap I have on hand. You could also use a detergent like specially made for delicates like Woolite, but I've never had issues with dish soap, so it's just what I've been doing. I also like to do this in a separate container, not in my sink, just to avoid any like residues from cleaners I've used in my sink or any food residue. And then basically I'm just going to give it a wash. If you have any like stubborn dirt stains, you can definitely really get in there, rub them out. You can also let this soak for a good long while if you need to. Once I feel like it's nice and clean, I'm going to take my time rinsing it out. You really want to remove any of the soap from the fabric and not leave behind any residue. Once you're done rinsing it out, you don't want to wring it dry. You want to actually place it on a nice clean towel and then roll it up inside of your towel. As I'm doing this, I'm going to kind of press and squeeze and just try to remove any excess water that I can, just so it's not dripping wet. And you could hang it dry at this point, but I like to iron mine dry. When I'm ironing my cross-stitch projects, I always prefer to do it on a nice fluffy towel instead of an ironing board. And I always like to place my projects face down and then iron from the back. Doing both of these things using a towel, ironing from the back, is just going to help prevent your stitches from getting squished. Now, because our project is still a little bit wet, we're essentially going to be creating our own steam. But if you skipped the step of washing your project and it were totally dry, you can still do it just like this. I just recommend not using any steam. Again, you don't want to risk any of your colors running or bleeding. And I just like to, run the iron around the back until it's dry. You can see I still have a little bit of a ring. If you ran into that, you could also just repeat the washing step as many times as you needed to. But I'm not too worried about it in this case, so we can move on to the next step. So I know washing a project at the end is not always an option, but honestly, I love when it is because I feel like it just really makes everything look so crisp and bright. But whether you've washed or not, it's now time to place our project in a hoop. For these last few steps, you'll want your project, of course. You'll want the hoop you're going to be finishing it in, a pair of scissors to cut your fabric, and a needle and thread. And I'm just going to be using the same tapestry needle I used to stitch the project and the leftover thread that I have. I don't think there's any real science to picking out what size hoop to use for finishing. I'll usually just experiment with a couple different sizes and see whichever one I like that looks best. Obviously, though, you just need to ensure you have enough fabric around the outside edge to be able to do your finishing. You do want to take your time getting it nice and centered when you place it in the hoop. These plastic hoops can be a little bit tricky, so don't worry if you need to kind of work it a little bit to get it to pop on there. Once you're happy with it though, and you like that it's nice and centered in there, we're going to go ahead and cut off some of the excess fabric. I like to leave about 1 to 2 inches around the outside edge. You could definitely measure this if you wanted to. I feel like it's totally fine to just eyeball it. Just keep in mind, you can always cut away more if you didn't cut enough away, but you can never add to it. So just keep that in mind and don't cut too close to the edge because you do need a little bit of overhang to be able to finish. So what we're going to do now is we're going to place a running stitch in that excess fabric that we have. So you want to take a nice long length of embroidery floss for this. You want enough to be able to go around your whole project, plus leave some long tails to work with. And I like to use 3 strands for this. It's totally personal preference. I wouldn't recommend using one though, just because I feel like it could break when you pull the whole thing together at the end.
but I do feel like 3 strands holds up really well. So now at the end of our 3 strands, we just want to tie a knot. I'm going to tie it like 2 or 3 times. I just want to be sure that it doesn't pop right through the fabric when I pull it through. And you can also see I am leaving a bit of a tail at the end of the knot. Again, it's just going to be a little bit more extra thread for me to work with at the end. And keep in mind, there are a million different ways to do this. I think this is just really simple, straightforward, and easy. So essentially, I'm just going to place a running stitch along the entire perimeter of my project. And essentially, you just come up through the fabric, maybe skip half an inch and then go back down, and you're just repeating that process all the way around. Now, once you've completed that running stitch along the outside perimeter, we're going to take the 2 tails and just pull. And it's kind of like magic. The whole thing just kind of falls to the back. And now I'm just, again, going to take my threads and tie a really nice tight knot here. Again, that's why I don't recommend one strand of embroidery floss, because here I really am pulling it tight so that I can keep all that fabric contained along the back. Now, this next step's optional, but I like to thread a needle with the remaining threads and just pull them through to the back so that it's sitting in between the excess fabric and the project. And that's really just about it. Again, there's a million different ways to do this. You can do like some really fun things with the back of these, but I feel like this is just the most simple, straightforward way to take care of the fabric on the back.
So believe it or not, that's really all there is to finishing your cross stitch project. This little guy is all ready to be displayed and hung up on my wall. Now I will admit, this is not the most impressive back by any means, but remember, my intention is to hang this up to be displayed, so no one's going to be looking at the back. However, if you did feel like this was just still feeling a little bit too unfinished, you could easily take a piece of felt or cloth, cut it to the diameter of your hoop, and attach it to the back either with a couching stitch or some hot glue. But either way, you now have a perfectly finished cross stitch project. From basic supplies to project prep, creating a cross stitch, and even tackling some of the more common pitfalls you might encounter along the way, we have covered it all in this series. And if you've been following along with me, congratulations on finishing your very first cross stitch project. And welcome to the wonderful world of cross stitch. I hope you have fallen in love with this craft just as much as I have, and that you have a new favorite hobby. Now, if you stitched this little heart along with me, you'll notice we kept things really nice and simple. But maybe you're looking ahead to your next project and noticing some things we didn't cover. Perhaps you're noticing some partial stitches, back stitching, or even French knots. Don't worry, I will be adding a bonus episode later on to cover the more common specialty stitches you are likely to encounter as you continue on with your cross stitch journey. Once again, I'm Jackie from Adam Hart Cross Stitch. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please do all the good things, like, comment, and subscribe if you would like to see more content like this. And until next time, happy stitching.